It's uncovered. And I'm Anthony, and he's Ron Filipkowski. And together we uncover the MAGA propaganda that is not covered by the mainstream media. Ron, we have some breaking news to deal with, as well as lots of clips of Donald Trump getting everything confused as his senile dementia kicks in. But first, why don't you tell us the news that took place on Monday? This was Alan Weisselberg, the former chief financial officer of the Trump organization, who's pleaded guilty to 2 counts of perjury in connection with testimony that he gave during Trump's civil fraud trial.
What makes this pretty funny is the fact that the New York Times wrote a story about this a month ago, where they said that they had information from a source that Weisselberg, immediately after he testified in Trump's trial, shortly thereafter, was being investigated for perjury, for lying on the witness stand. And Judge Engeron read that story in the New York Times right as he's about to make his decision in the case. And he sends out a letter to Alina Habba and says, look, I've just read this story that says he's negotiating a guilty plea for perjuring himself. This is something I need to know. If you know anything about this, you need to disclose that to me. She responded with a scathing letter to Engeron, just upbraiding him, saying basically fake news. You know, you can't rely on the New York Times. You can't rely on a news article. And I've consulted with my ethics counsel. I'm not sure who that was, but she just refused to say anything about it and just said, you know, you can't rely on any fake news story. Then what do we learn? Boom, he pleads guilty this morning, which is Monday morning. We're recording this, to 5 months in jail for perjuring himself in the trial. So she introduced perjured testimony in Trump's defense.
Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA, recommended Weisselberg be sentenced to 5 months in jail, agreed to his release before sentencing, which is scheduled for April 10. I mean, Weisselberg was like pretty much running the Trump organization, wasn't he? I mean, he really was a very senior figure and was one of these guys that was installed by Fred Trump years ago.
He was, and this is the second time he's going to go to jail for Donald Trump, and neither one needed to happen. If he had simply, cooperated with the investigators at the time, that none of this would have happened, and he would not have gone to jail. But unfortunately for him, he just can't stop lying for Trump.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting the number of people that are prepared to carry the can for Donald Trump, which goes to prove, because we often refer to him as a mafia boss, that kind of, pressure campaign, that kind of emotional blackmail, financial blackmail, political blackmail. I mean, there's an awful lot of that involved as well. And this is why I keep saying that Trump will slip through the fingers of justice, because he always seems to find people to, take the rap for him.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody else goes to jail. His lawyer's constantly getting disbarred. His lawyer's constantly getting sued. And Alina Habba is well on her way to being in a lot of trouble because we now know that she introduced perjured testimony and was asked about it directly by the judge. She denied everything. So she's not doing well up in New York.
There is a theme with MAGA lies, which for me started in a very obvious way with Sean Spicer and the crowd size at the first Trump press conference, right? Saying, biggest inauguration ever, period, which, was just factually inaccurate. And they just doubled down on it. And then Kellyanne Conway introducing alternative facts and that kind of becoming something that became culturally and socially acceptable. You have your facts, I have mine, which is just like, both sides journalism. It's just not a thing. But the theme is that Donald Trump, a bit like how he thought he could make COVID go away by not talking about it or by not testing, if we do fewer tests, we'll find fewer cases and therefore, it won't be there. It's like pretending that it's disappeared when it hasn't. This is a very kind of Trumpian and MAGA Republican way of doing business. If you squint, it's gone. Or if you squint, it's there sometimes, when it comes to these investigations. I mean, you came from this, Republican world. do they know that they're lying? Are they always plotting to lie, or is this just like in the fabric, the very DNA of these people?
I mean, it's in the DNA of the Trump people. Yeah. I mean, it comes straight from the top. And I think everybody in his orbit sort of adopts that personality and that way of doing things, because that's what he insists on. And I think part of the problem why in the past we've seen him have difficulty hiring good lawyers and finding good lawyers to represent him is because they know that.
Yeah.
A good lawyer understands that when I represent Trump, he's going to ask me to do things that are ethically questionable, and I'm going to put my law license in jeopardy and maybe even my liberty in jeopardy if I represent this guy. So that's why most of them say no, and he's stuck with people like Alina Habba. Now, I will say his appellate lawyers are better than his trial lawyers because they don't really so much have to worry about Trump. I mean, they're arguing just case law, to appellate courts. So Trump's not really a huge factor on, and that's why he's able, I think, to get better appellate lawyers. But as far as trial lawyers go, none of the good ones even want anything to do with him.
Well, also, they don't get paid, which has probably got something to do with it. It's probably got more to do with it, actually, right? Because everyone has their price. But if you're not getting your price, then there's no point in playing the game. The other breaking news we need to deal with, last week when we spoke, we just heard, in fact, at the end of the show last week, the story broke about the Supreme Court hearing Donald Trump's immunity case over whether he's immune from all of these charges, insurrection and everything else. The latest news is this was on Monday, which is when we're recording this. We have to record this week because of our schedules. But on Monday, the Supreme Court handed a sweeping win to Trump. This is how it's being described by the media, by ruling that states cannot kick him off the ballot over his actions leading up to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. In an unsigned ruling with no dissents, the court reversed the Colorado Supreme Court, which determined that Trump could not serve again as president under Section 3 of the Constitution's 14th Amendment. The provision prohibits those who previously held government positions but later engage in insurrection from running for various offices. I mean, this is just supporting my argument. I keep making it that he is untouchable, and now the Supreme Court is involved. They may be hearing the immunity case because they want to kick the can down the road and just delay, but there's a good chance they could hand him immunity in the same way now they're stepping in to allow him to run despite committing insurrection on television. I mean, I watched it, you watched it too.
Yeah, let me separate those two things, the two cases. One is on this case. Look, I listened to the oral arguments. It was pretty obvious where they were going. Even when the most liberal justices expressed skepticism over what Colorado did, I knew that it was going to be bad. I posted on Twitter that Colorado had a 0% chance of winning. I wrote an article predicting that the opinion would be unanimous. Yeah. So this was no surprise. And I think what the majority of the justices relied on is the basic argument that I thought, which is when this amendment was put into effect, it stated the law, nobody can run for president or any other federal office if you've committed insurrection. The problem is what the Supreme Court said is that Congress then needed to put forth a framework, a procedural framework for how this is going to work. And is each state going to be allowed to do this? What are the rules? What are the legal standards? There needed to be a federal statute that was passed so that each one of the 50 states aren't making up their own rules. And that's really the main issue that they had, was that since Congress never gave the states any guidance, that basically allows all 50 states to, do you get a jury? Do you not get a jury? Is it reasonable doubt? Is it preponderance of the evidence? How do you define insurrection? And they just didn't want to have 50 different states doing 50 different things.
I mean, again, this toing and froing, because, with the immunity argument, that one was a really well written and tied up case, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In the lower court. And so everybody was like surmising, oh well, they're just going to support it because it's belt and braces, as we call it in England. And then that turned out not to be the case. They decided to hear it. I mean, this is not justice. This is injustice, isn't it? I mean, this is just changing the rules for the rich white guy.
Yeah, and the most frustrating part is, because this is a different situation than the Colorado thing, was that 4 months ago when Trump first filed his appeal, Jack Smith petitioned the Supreme Court and said, look, he's appealing to a court one step below you. We know you're probably likely to take this case because it's an important case on something that's never really been decided before. So why are we going to waste our time going to the DC circuit and delaying this for 3 months when you're probably going to take it anyway? So will you just take it now? And, their response was, well, what's the rush? Why are you in such a hurry? Now, the problem is we know the reason what's the rush is, the election calendar is coming up. The problem is that the Department of Justice has guidelines for prosecutors, rules, and they are not allowed to use any election calendar as part of any legal argument on scheduling. So they're basically saying, well, you tell us why you're in such a hurry. And Jack Smith is basically saying, I'm not allowed to say, basically to give you the real reason, which should be obvious to you. And so now they've taken the case. Not only did they take the case, they set oral argument on their last week when they're in session. So they delayed that. And so what I think they're going to do there is they're going to split the baby, as we say in the law. They're going to invoke Solomon. They're going to, I think, not say that presidents have complete and total immunity, but they're going to set a framework for when, in certain circumstances, a president can have immunity, and they'll lay out that test, and that's probably what's going to be the decision.
I mean, part of the problem is that there's no precedent for this, right? And
Right.
So they are making it up as they go along. And as the court has become so politicized in recent years, I mean, if this was done decades ago, before the court was so polarized, then maybe you could expect some kind of justice. But, the court is packed effectively with three mostly unqualified Trump judges who, I mean, Amy Coney Barrett never heard a case, when she was doing her, regular lawyering. So how do we get to a point where, now we've got such a political court that is hearing such a political case? It's just incompatible with justice.
Yeah, not how it's supposed to work. I think that this decision, if it goes highly in favor of Trump, I tend to think it won't. I think it's going to kind of go halfway between the positions of the two parties. But if it is completely pro-Trump, I think it completely delegitimizes the court that's been well on its way trying to delegitimize itself already.
But shouldn't Clarence Thomas have recused himself? I mean, his wife was there on January 6th. There is evidence to suggest that she was involved in the planning of the insurrection. I mean, that makes a mockery of the court as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, Clarence Thomas should recuse himself with any case that has to do with January 6th. And I don't think he has to recuse himself for all Trump cases, but anything that connects to what happened on January 6th or the January 6th case, he should. The problem is, there's all these very strict rules on when trial judges or lower court judges have to recuse themselves, but the Supreme Court really doesn't have those same kind of rules, and there's nobody to enforce it. They're all just on their own to do what they think is the right thing to do. I mean, the only real check is you have the chief judge, Roberts. All he can do is scold them, but he has no authority over the other judges either. So
it's lawlessness at the very top of the justice system is what we're dealing with. It's just that hypocrisy. The regular people have to abide by the law, and yet the people who make the laws can kind of do what they want.
Yeah,
go on.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say, I mean, we've really only had that happen twice before in our history. Once was when the Supreme Court in the late 19th century was upholding all the Jim Crow laws, And then the other was when it was striking down all the New Deal stuff that Franklin Roosevelt proposed. But we really haven't had this kind of a crisis with the Supreme Court in 90 years.
But it is a constitutional crisis. I mean, that's the thing. Again, there is this denialism that oh, America will work itself out. And me as an outsider, as a European who sees other systems, and, it's like, go to Switzerland, see how they do it. They literally have one of the best political systems in the world. No one really understands that there is another way. This way is failing. And this is why it's so difficult that, when Donald Trump is campaigning for, against the deep state and for change, it does to a lot of people make a lot of sense, because the system that we have, that Joe Biden is advocating for, which is business as usual, is so very broken. And that is a problem going into this election.
Yeah. I mean, it's the people in, I don't think it's the system itself. I think it's the people in the system. Yeah.
But the people make the system, don't they? I mean,
yeah, they do.
A society is people, a culture is people. It's, you can't erase the people from this issue. And that's my worry, is that the status quo, if you want to have it remain, is so very broken and corrupt. And I'm sure that is part of the Republicans' plan, is to try and make people think that the system is broken, but not that bit of the system, not the Supreme Court bit of the system, but the deep state, which, as we know, is just the federal government with regular federal workers. I want to talk about Donald Trump and his mental health, because, again, this is something that the media is so focused on Joe Biden and his slip-ups. And, I was listening to an expert psychologist talking about this stuff and saying that there is a difference between Joe Biden's slip-ups and Donald Trump's slip-ups. And Donald Trump is, replacing entire people, replacing Biden with Obama in sentences, whereas Joe Biden's are more like mistakes, forgetful because of age. We all forget, recall changes. But Donald Trump's are more associated with dementia by nature of the mistakes that he's making time and time again and trying to excuse them. You put together a montage of clips. I'll play just some of it, but it's just a very interesting place to start, actually seeing all of these together.
That is no longer admired, respected, or listened to will repeat your. Anytime I start talking, they take the red light off. Look, he can't campaign. He can't speak. So we call it migrant crime. I came up with that name because I come up with a lot of good names. You see Maduro, Venezuela, it's unbelievable. Is going to the border, doing a show. Sean Hannity, good man, Sean Hannity. We'll demolish the deep state. We will expel the warmongers. Production in the United States, country, even Argentina, they went MAGA. Argentina, great guy. He's a big Trump guy. He loves Trump. I love him because he loves Trump. When he called, I took his call. Anybody that loves me, I like them. Biden border will. Well, you know this, right? The Biden border bill. I'm thrilled to be back in the beautiful Virginia. We went to the last two total. Last Tuesday, Michigan total was a record. Like, ding, boom. This is me. I hear, bing. You heard the hostages singing. That was the hostages. They're the J6 hostages, I call them, because they are. I'm being indicted for you. I am. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm allowed to do whatever I want. He stinks. That's not the kind of people, that we talk. This is a positive swamping. Gavin Newsom, the new scum, the governor of California. We want to get Romney.
How this guy is even allowed in the political arena, let alone to run for president, and with a good chance of winning, it's so frustrating that, because you can see how different, as I described before, how different the mistakes are compared to Joe Biden. They're both old men, but Trump is definitely, his mental state is getting worse. Joe Biden's always had the stutter. He's always had the recall issues. He's all, if you look at video of him from 20, 30 years ago, it's pretty much the same.
I think the biggest difference is drug use, to be honest with you.
Interesting.
And I think you can really see it. I paid a lot more attention to see, because I watch a lot of footage of Trump on the golf course, Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and he's not as bad. He doesn't look that way. He's not sweating like crazy, and he's not slurring his words. I think that he's got some dementia stuff, like you said, but I think what is really makes it worse is when he's doing these speeches, he's jacked up on something. Because you can see it. I mean, you could just see him sweating through his makeup.
Yeah.
He's talking differently. He's talking much faster than he normally talks. Like, I've seen him just walk in and jump up on stages at Mar-a-Lago almost every day. I watched one yesterday. There was some dog charity thing going on there, and he didn't sound like that, and he didn't look like that. So I think he's geeked up on some substance that is causing this. And I don't think there's anybody in his orbit that can get him to stop, because he just seems to be getting worse and worse with whatever's going on here.
And if the trajectory continues like this, then by November, he's going to be all over the place. But all of these things contribute. You know, there's so much media now saying that Joe Biden will lose to Trump, and Trump, because of, you know, these various primary wins. And in fact, I have friends in the UK who've called me or texted me, and they're like, well, you know, Trump's got it, hasn't he? I do think there's a real misunderstanding of how American politics works. I think that the international media is confusing his success in these primaries with, you know, his likely success in November, which, of course, you know, this is basically the cult voting for the cult. So, you know, that's not going to change. And I've also been making the point recently that you cannot poll cult members. They're incompatible. Polling and cult membership or allegiance is incompatible. And so I don't think really anyone's going to know anything until a couple of months out. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, I think the primary results show more weakness with him than strength. I mean, where you consistently have 30 to 40% of Republican primary voters voting against Trump, that is not a sign of strength. I was thinking yesterday, when was the last time, because he's really should be considered almost an incumbent, right? Because he's a last president, leader of the party, clearly, who's running again. The last time somebody challenged basically an undisputed leader of a party like that, who's a former president, and got this much traction in a primary was 1992, when Pat Buchanan did it with George H.W. Bush. He challenged him, and even though he lost every primary, just like Haley is doing, he consistently got 25-30% of the vote, just like Haley. And what that showed, which I think a lot of people didn't really appreciate at the time, because H.W. Bush's approval ratings were quite high. But what it showed at that time, was a weakness, a fundamental weakness among the party base, that they weren't all in with George H.W. Bush.
Yeah.
And then it bit him. So yeah, and very few people were predicting back then that Bush was going to lose to Clinton, but he lost fairly handily. So yes, and we still got all these criminal cases coming up. So no, I don't assume that right now Trump's got anything, despite the polls.
Yeah, and despite the media, I just want to remind people that the media is handling this really badly.
Let's go back and talk about that, because, you know, one thing you'll never hear the media do is speculate on mental health or drug use. You know? Yeah. And I think if maybe they would start, and they're afraid of being sued, and I understand that, but they can do it in a responsible way where they can present it as theories and not fact. And you don't necessarily try to have somebody diagnose it either, but you can just put speeches side by side and say, this is Trump at Mar-a-Lago yesterday, this is Trump today. Something's going on here.
Yeah. But that's why it's not journalism. You know, it is just this churn of infotainment. But what we watch in these news channels and is not journalism. Because if it was journalism, then they would be focusing just on his mental health, just on his personality disorder, and trying to, you know, make that the center of the story, because it's the truth. We're ignoring the biggest part of Trump, which is the narcissism and the control and the mental health. It's beggars belief to me that And this is why we're sleepwalking into fascism and to a dictatorship, because we're leaving out the aspects. I mean, Hitler's mental pathology has been studied by so many.
And his drug use.
And his drug use. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trump made reference to a migrant who's been exonerated in the speech. This is the other thing, is this the information that is just plainly false that he's saying. Here's the clip.
Our police in New York City, our police are being mobbed, brutalized, and horrifically beaten by swarms of migrants who have no business being in our country, yet then they are released back onto the streets while giving our police officers the middle finger. You saw that, right, the other day? These are people that come from countries, I guarantee you they wouldn't do that in their country. They wouldn't do that in their country. I know their countries. You do that in their country, they wouldn't be living for more than 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's why they're coming here. That's what asylum is. You're getting away from a country where you're going to be killed for just living to a free country. The guy has forgotten, A, what migration is, but I would also just say, and I know that you can give us some more detail on this particular story, but the word swarm he used, the word swarm. Now, in England, when previous prime ministers have said, referring to migration, they are swarming, that is a reference to vermin or to a plague of whatever, locusts or whatever. But it is so, it's such a terrible way to talk about human beings. And yet Trump just does it like it's normal.
Yeah, this is the part of the campaign that I predicted for 2 years. I knew it was coming. I was dreading it, and it's here. And I can tell you, if you don't follow right-wing media or right-wing social media, your mental health is better than mine, because, I suffer through this stuff every day. And what I'm talking about is, when you have millions of people who have come in the country, even though all the studies show that migrants commit crime at much lower rates than Native Americans across the board in every category, it doesn't matter, because they're going to take every single crime, like the murder that just happened in Athens, Georgia, which, by the way, Athens, Georgia is a critical electorate for Democrats. It's the only white majority Democrat city in Georgia. It is a critical voting block. And you had a murder by a migrant from Venezuela, which has been round the clock in their media 24/7 since it happened. And now this New York case, every single crime, every break-in, every robbery, every resisting arrest is being blown up into a national story by right-wing media every single day, one right after the other. So even though you could only have 100 crimes between now and election day, but you better believe all 100 are going to be played up like they're the crimes of the century. This one in New York City there were 3, 4, 5 migrants that were in a tussle with the police. It was over them trying to remove somebody from a migrant shelter who wasn't supposed to be there. And the person who was let out of jail, who gave the middle finger to the media, was because he was exonerated. They admitted they had the wrong guy and he wasn't even there.
Yeah, it's like the Churchill victory sign, isn't it? I mean, that's effectively what he's doing.
So the person who Trump is there accusing of this is innocent, is an innocent person, but he doesn't care. No. He just moves on to the next one.
Because he knows that the people that are listening, or, his audience, will never check, because they take whatever he says as gospel.
Yeah, they don't care.
Let's talk about Trump's flip-flopping on the abortion ban, because, he's now suggesting that he might be open to a 15-week national abortion ban. Let's take a look.
But largely, they're coming in with a certain number of weeks, and the number 15 is mentioned. I haven't agreed to any number. I'm going to see. We want to take an issue that was very polarizing and get it settled and solved so everybody can be happy. But
I mean, firstly, he talks in riddles, right? So you can't nail him down. This is kind of mafia behavior, isn't it? You just always dancing around with a word salad around the subject.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear duplicity. I mean, this is a Fox interviewer. This is so frustrating to me, that he does these interviews, and the the painfully obvious questions don't get asked. Like right here, it's like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? A 15-week abortion ban? That's Roe versus Wade. That's what you didn't want.
Yeah.
That's what you got overturned.
Yeah.
Now what you want to do is implement what was just overturned into federal law. That's number one. Number two, wait, you have been saying since 2016, when you pretended you were pro-life, you're pro illegal abortion, was that abortion is murder. So now what you're saying is that it's okay for a woman to abort a fetus at 14 weeks, and now it's not murder anymore because you need to win an election? I mean, this is just outrageous what he's trying to do on abortion. He's just lying like crazy because he knows that this issue is going to kill him in November and kill Republicans. And so that's why he keeps saying, oh, Republicans don't know how to talk about it. Well, the reality is they do know how to talk about it. They believe it's murder, and that's their position. Trump, on the other hand, doesn't care about this issue. He just wants to win his election. And so what he says right there is just absolutely preposterous, that he wants a 15-week ban. That's his whole party disagrees with that.
I mean, this is the problem of having a former Democrat reality TV show host with a personality disorder being your leader, right? Is that facts are irrelevant. He doesn't actually have any opinions of his own. He is a populist. He'll say whatever is necessary to get elected, which means that you can't really say, oh, yeah, I agree with Trump, because Trump doesn't even agree with himself.
Yeah, I mean, you could go through Mitch McConnell, Mike Pence, Rick Scott, Greg Abbott. We could pick any Republican you want and say, do you think abortion should be legal at 14 weeks? They will all say no. None of them agree with what he just said. So how can a Fox host sit there and let him take the position that is basically codifying Roe versus Wade into federal law and not say anything about it?
But Trump never really knew what Roe was in the first place. I mean, he's, this is the whole thing with him, right?
Yeah.
He's like, I'm the only person who could get it done. Well, yeah, you're the only person who didn't read it and or care, have any kind of emotional connection to the subject. You were just told that this is something that will be helpful for your presidency. It's so sad that, because we're talking about people's lives. We're talking about, the families that have to go through the pain and the strain as a result of these political decisions. It's just so offensive to humanity. It's inhuman what he is doing, messing around with this. You take a position and stick with it, but to mess around with it is playing with people's minds, and that's really sad and dangerous. Didn't Joe Biden really get under his skin the other day? Because Joe Biden made reference to something that he'd said, and I think when he was on Seth Meyers' show, and Trump was not happy about it, had a bit of a meltdown, and made a whole video about it. Let's take a look.
He went on a very poorly rated show last night, and he talked about Donald Trump and his wife. I don't know the name of my wife. He was referring to the fact that at CPAC, where I had a sold-out speech, the biggest audience they've had in years, I think maybe ever, I made the statement that Melania was very popular because when I mentioned her name, the audience went wild. I then looked at the two people, man and wife, Matt and Mercedes Schlapp, and I said, wow, they really like the First Lady. So this got taken as the fact that I thought Mercedes was the First Lady. It has nothing to do with that. These people are really dishonest. They are absolutely something. They have a horrible candidate who's a horrible president. They make up things constantly. You take a look at when I use Barack Hussein Obama and I interject him.
I mean, there's no intentional switching up of anything with this guy, right? Donald Trump is a man who is all over the place, as we've discussed earlier.
Yeah, he can deny it. I mean, we've shown the clips many times. It's obvious he screws up the names.
Right. But there is a serious point here, which he is actually right about, and that is that he turned to the side when he was making this speech and said, "Isn't that right, Mercedes?" And apparently she was standing there, and Joe Biden probably shouldn't have used that reference to claim that he didn't know his wife's name, because Joe Biden was reacting to media coverage, right?
Correct. The media was wrong. We did not run that. Midas did not say that he mixed up the name, because we talked about it when it happened. Yeah. And Asen, myself, and Brett, we got together and we looked at it and we said, no, he's talking about Mercedes Schlapp.
Yeah.
So we didn't go with it, but other media did. And so Biden said it on that late night show. Seth Meyers, he made the joke about it on Seth Meyers.
But he could have picked a million other moments where Trump got something wrong.
Yeah.
And didn't. I mean, is that bad advice that Joe Biden is getting? I mean, or was that just something he did off his own back?
Yeah, I mean, he clearly got advice about that. Yeah, I mean, I just think that the reason why it got so much under Trump's skin is because it had to do with Melania. It wasn't even because for the first time Trump was right.
Yeah.
I think because this is a sensitive subject for him. And by the way, that video he put out at like 10 o'clock at night. So what he did, and he didn't, sometimes he'll film like 5 or 6 in a row and put them out, but he did not. That was a one-off. So what that means is that, after that happened, after Biden told that joke, he actually like put on a suit and ran into his studio, and you could tell he's fuming there. So, and he did that video and put it out to respond. So even though Biden was probably wrong, the fact that it got under his skin so much is made it almost worthwhile. But the reason why is because Melania has not, he hears people like me and other people out there saying, "Where's Melania?" all the time, because Melania has not appeared at a single campaign event. This is another thing the media is not reporting. I tried to, when I was invited to do a TV segment, I won't say on what network, but I was invited. They asked me what I wanted to talk about. I said, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the fact that Melania has not been at a single campaign event in a year and a half. They didn't want to talk about it. I think that's a story. And you can clearly see that whenever anybody brings that up, he gets pretty damn upset.
Well, he's embarrassed, isn't he? And he's also he's been dumped effectively. I mean, that's what's happened. He's been dumped by his own wife, and all the money and all of the trappings and the gold toilet and the pedicures and all the stuff that he thought was the transactional stuff to keep her around is clearly not working. And that must be very frustrating for him.
And now what he's doing is he's going out of his way in every speech, as he did on Saturday, to talk about Melania.
Yeah.
I mean, he feels like the need. He's like, I was, and he always does this. What he'll do is he says, I was just talking to Melania, the first lady, last night.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, wait a minute. I didn't see her last night at Mar-a-Lago when I saw the footage from that event, so he's still trying to like, and what he said on Saturday was, and she's going to be out here on the campaign trail real soon. It's like,
yeah.
Along with his
healthcare bill that's coming real soon as well. Talk to me about J.R. Majewski, because he's just dropped out, hasn't he? And Trump endorsed him famously back in 2022. And this guy's very questionable, isn't he? Let me show the clip and then you can explain.
A man named J.R. Majewski. Do you know who that is? Quick story. I was in Ohio and I'm giving a little speech in front of about 40,000, a smaller crowd, one of our smaller crowds. And I was told that there's somebody named J.R. Majewski there. They said he was a farmer. He's actually not a farmer. He's a physicist. I'd say that's a big difference, right? But what the hell? Nobody cared. But he was sort of running, but not really running. But he was trying to make a point because he's got some great points to make. And I introduced him to this massive crowd, J.R. Majewski, and the place went crazy. And he wasn't supposed to be playing in the race much. He was just doing to make a point. But there were 4 other people that were serious politicians in the race. And the next day, the numbers came out. And the winner was J.R. Majewski. How the hell did that happen, J.R.? How did that happen? Huh? Well, we love you, man. He'd go out to these big fields and he'd carve the name Trump. And I was flying into Ohio once. I said, look at this in a wheat field. The name Trump, the letters were about 60 feet high. I was 30,000 feet up, and I said, look, there's Trump. Who did that? It was J.R. Bajewski. Right?
So weird cult behavior. So there was some stuff that Majewski said that was inappropriate, and this is why it's all backfired, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is quite a colorful character. So yes, Trump is correct. He had the giant yard painted blue with the Trump words way back in the day. You know, but what Trump does there, it's just so despicable what he does there. Because, you know, when Majewski won that primary back in 22, that was like the greatest accomplishment of his life. That guy had never hardly, that guy hadn't done much. I mean, he'd been in the Air Force, okay. And that was part of the controversy back then, is he claimed he was a combat veteran when, you know, he unloaded planes in Afghanistan, cargo, you know. So, all right, you know, I'm not to disparage anybody's service, but he exaggerated his service, okay. And but what does Trump do there? He takes credit for this guy's primary. I mean, is it really that important for Donald Trump to write to this guy's face in front of his home crowd to say he only won this because of me? He went out of his way to say that, which is, to me, is just despicable. If you're a gracious person, you just say, I'm happy for him. He did a great job. He ran a great campaign. No, what Trump said is, well, this guy really was floundering around and he wasn't really serious, but I mentioned his name and then he won, which I don't believe is correct at all. I think Majewski ran a halfway decent campaign. It's a rural district, and he won his primary. But look, why this is important is this is Marcy Kaptur's district. It is a 50-50 district. It is a toss-up, could go either way. So this is an important race every 2 years. It's a battleground district. So it's really important. So what did he do last week? He was he made a comment. He said in a radio interview, he said, Democrats are so effing retarded. They're like athletes in a Special Olympics event. That's what he said. And look, he just lost everybody. I mean, even MAGA was like, dude, we need to win this seat. You need to get out of this race right now. Even that was even too far for MAGA, you know,
which says quite a lot. I want to talk about James Comer and the kind of Hunter Biden case, and you know, the Joe Biden impeachment, which has fallen apart. And you know, we learned the other week that one of their main informants turned out to be colluding with Russia, and so that kind of caused that to collapse. But Comer is still trying to save face, isn't he? Let's take a look.
But at the end of the day, we're going to try to hold this family accountable. We're going to try to have referrals. We're going to try to identify the people in the deep state that were part of the cover-up. Because remember, in addition to the Biden financial crimes, we also have the cover-up by the deep state actors. So we're trying to hold everyone accountable. We're trying to wrap this up. And I think that the deposition with Hunter Biden and the transcribed interview with Jim Biden were huge successes.
Chairman Comer, thank you for.
I don't know who Jim Biden is. Maybe that's a combination of.
That's Joe's brother.
That's Joe brother. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought he was confusing Jim Jordan. That's right. Joe's brother did go in, didn't he? And talk to them?
James Biden. Yeah.
James Biden. Okay, that's why he called him Jim. And also, let's not forget that there was eventually a closed door meeting with Hunter Biden, despite the fact that he was, pushing back on it, and then he randomly showed up outside and made a speech, and then the next time he actually showed up inside. So they finally got him, but it didn't turn out as they had hoped, did it?
No, they got nothing out of that deposition. I mean, Hunter was quite clear. He was consistent with Devin Archer's testimony that even though he had phone conversations, et cetera, with his dad every day, they never discussed business. They couldn't prove that he ever did anything for him. I think the biggest thing that came out of Hunter's deposition was that the Republicans have always kind of painted him as this drug addict, flunky, useless son who had no skills or no business acumen. But Hunter spent quite a lot of time going through his resume. and all the things that he's done and all the boards he's sat on, to just kind of say, look, I'm not just I'm not like Donald Trump Jr. here. I actually went to law school, practiced law, worked in DC for all these businesses and firms. So I think that was the best. But, one thing you did not hear there in what Comer's doing is damage control. I mean, he's gotten the orders from his members. We're not doing this anymore. We're out, and you're embarrassing us, and we don't want any more of this foolishness. So this thing is dead. So what he's doing there is spin control. What he's talking about is we're going to do some referrals. So he's going to prepare a report. He's going to forward it to Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland's going to toss it in the trash can, and then they're going to see, he's protecting Joe Biden. But one thing he didn't say is we're going to put this up for an impeachment vote. Comer didn't say that, did he? Because this thing's dead.
And we also have Mike Johnson promising the January 6th kind of extended director's cut footage with blurred faces, but it turned out that they can't actually do blurred faces. And so this presser was put out, wasn't it, from the Subcommittee on Oversight, which says that Committee on House Administration releases 5,000 more hours of January 6 footage. But the small print is basically that, well, now they're just going to show it as was. Is that right?
Oh, look at the bottom. The last paragraph is the key one there.
Okay, well, this is very small, so let me see if I can blow it up. It says, additionally, upon extensive further consultation with the committee and at my direction, the committee will no longer plan to blur the faces of individuals in the footage, given the significant logistical hurdles involved in the importance of getting this work completed as responsibly and efficiently as possible. Well, this is what I said the other week, is that the technology required to blur all these faces is going to take months.
This guy is such a clown. I mean, he's just so funny. I mean, he's just so incompetent. Yes, I mean, when he becomes speaker, one of his first promises is, I'm going to release all, whatever it is, 40,000 hours of footage, right? And this is a big thing because this was a promise that McCarthy made and broke, never did it. And so, a week goes by and they're all like, where the hell is this stuff? And he puts out, I don't know what it was, like 40 hours or something of stuff with all these faces blurred. And everybody's like, well, what the hell is this? This is not, this is like less than 1% of the footage and the faces are blurred. And his response was, we don't want any of these internet sleuths identifying people who have never been arrested or charged and telling the FBI. So that's why we're blurring the faces. So, okay, you're going to protect criminals. That's why you can't release this stuff. And everybody said what you just said at the time. It's like, how is this possible? There's thousands of people. How are you going to continuously blur them out? That's going to cost a fortune. It's going to take forever. And so what happened was a couple of weeks ago, some of the right wingers were again going, what the hell's going on? You've been speaker for 5 months or whatever. We still don't have more footage. And so I think that he was starting to hear from them again. And so then he finally released 4,000, I think it was 4,000 more hours, maybe 10%, unblurred, and released that statement. So it clearly shows that this guy is a fool. And by the way, the hours that he released was mostly empty hallways.
Yeah.
What he did is he cherry picked out the footage that basically had no people in it.
Yeah.
And he put that out. So even still, he hasn't really put out any of the significant footage. So, I mean, it's kind of like a catch-22 where the right wingers want this stuff released because they think it's going to reveal some big deep state plot with FBI agents hidden in the crowd. But Mike Johnson knows that that's not true. And he knows that the only thing that's going to happen is more people are going to end up getting arrested as soon as he releases it.
So many of these things, whether it be the sham impeachment or the Hunter Biden thing that turned out not to be a thing, or trying to rewrite history about January 6th. I mean, all of this stuff will come to nothing. But the damage that it does in the meantime is that, A, it kind of delays proceedings leading up into the election cycle. And so it leaves people with doubt and confusion. And really that's their game, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it really just shows his incompetence just as an administrator. Yeah. I mean, wasn't there anybody there in the room who told him, listen, Mr. Speaker, this is going to take years to do what you want to do and cost $10 million. I'm sure there had to be some people in the room who told him that, but maybe God was telling him that it was all going to get worked out.
That's who it was. That's who it was. When we talk about his boss, I think it's either Trump or God, and sometimes they're interchangeable. Okay, listen, we have to take a quick pause for our sponsor. I want to come back and show this video of Judge Engoron in the gym. Some MAGA guy tried to, do a hit on him, and it didn't quite go according to plan. That's next here on Uncovered. Are you self-conscious about your smile due to stains? Are your teeth aging you? Food and drink are known to stain teeth. Coffee, wine, they stain over time. So what can you do to brighten your smile? Well, you should give Smile Actives a try. Smile Actives is safe, effective, easy to use, and will keep you smiling proudly. I personally have been to a dentist and had a teeth whitening treatment. It was painful, it was uncomfortable, and it was not a experience that I would want to repeat. Well, simply add Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel to your regular toothpaste. Do it at home. It's been formulated with polyclean technology to boost stain removal and deliver active whitening ingredients into teeth's grooves to get better whitening. People will start commenting on your whiter, brighter smile in just days. Smile Actives is the whitening boost your favorite toothpaste needs to give you the smile you deserve. Visit smileactives.com/uncovered today to receive a special buy one, get one free offer with auto delivery plus free shipping and handling. That's smileactives.com/uncovered. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details. We're back. It's Uncovered. I'm Anthony Davis. He's Ron Filipkowski. This hit job on the Judge Engoron, who is overseeing it's the Letitia James case, isn't it? He's been through quite a lot, Judge Engoron, and we've criticized him a little bit for being a little bit goofy on camera, but he's now been having to deal with, all sorts of threats and everything else. Just before I show the video, just set up this deal with this MAGA guy, O'Keefe, and what they were trying to do here to somehow prove, I guess, that Judge Engoron is a Democrat and is just out to get Trump. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, given all the threats and everything that he's had to endure as a result of the Trump case, this was a singularly bad idea by James O'Keefe. But, he's so desperate to regain relevance. And I'll explain, 10 years or so ago, James O'Keefe started Project Veritas, which became very well known and very infamous for these honeypot sting operations where he basically had young Laura Loomer work for him, Anna Kate work for him, who was a Survivor contestant. He was hiring young women to basically set up dates, meet random CEOs, journalists, and sweet talk them and secretly record them and try and get them to say negative things about their companies, their boss, or whatever the case may be. And a lot of times, these older men, when they're trying to impress pretty young women, will say dumb things. They'll exaggerate, they'll brag. They did this with Pfizer executives during COVID. This is what James does. But James blew up his entire organization and wrecked it because he decided he wanted to be a musical performer and was starting to siphon off a lot of the money that was donated to his company for journalism, for right-wing journalism, and doing it to produce musicals and travel around the country. And his board fired him last year, 2 years ago. And then what happened is Project Veritas ended up going broke. They lost all their money because they lost all their donors after they fired O'Keefe, because O'Keefe was the star. So now he's recently started a new media company, and with basically him on his own, he's starting all over again. And he's been trying to set up these things himself instead of, using attractive young women. He's trying to go undercover himself. And they've been epic fails. And I think he thought that this, setting up Judge Engoron and getting him to say something disparaging about Donald Trump might actually help get this whole case overturned and be national news if they could show he's as biased. And so He found out where Engeron works out his gym, and he went in undercover to secretly record him. And he's trying to bait Engeron into saying something about Trump. And Engeron did not take the bait.
Here it is.
Alongside him. I'm a huge fan. Huge fan. Thank you for what you did. Thank you so much.
For what?
Thank you for what you did. Man, I must have felt good. Oh, shit. Making these MAGA people out of the state. Just thank you with all my heart.
Thank you. What's your day job?
I was wearing the OMG t-shirt which said O'Keefe Media Group, but the judge didn't know who I was. My day job, I work in publishing. I print magazines. Yeah. But I really means a lot to me. Now he's on there. Yeah.
John?
You're a very good all mine, man. So keep it up. Thank you.
Yep. 10 and 15 reps. We want to keep a nice tall chest, hold it nice and low.
I get it.
What's your name?
Jim.
Jim.
Keep it up. Keep up the good work.
Well, if the judge was socially profiling him, he looks like a MAGA guy for a start, right? So no, I wasn't surprised that he was weary of him. But even so, I mean, this really is a really low move, isn't it? To do something like this. Who are these people? I mean, this just plays into what we were saying earlier about the lying and the cheating. It's like the theme with Republicans or MAGA Republicans or any of these people. It's just a total lack of any moral compass.
Well, I mean, I guess he thought that if he could get Engeron to say something stupid, he would be instantly back on top. He would be a hero, you know, and he would be vindicated with all of his right-wing friends. Instead, he got nothing. You know, Engeron was smart enough not to trust this guy and just said, thank you. You know, that's about
How did
it.
it play, though, in the right wing? You know, because obviously O'Keefe put this out.
Did. He hyped it.
So what were the comments like? How did people in his orbit respond?
Yeah, I mean, he hyped it for days and, you know, talked about how he had Engeron on tape and everybody got all worked up. And when he put it out, it kind of went viral for a few hours, but then it fizzled out.
Yeah.
Because, you know, he got nothing. He got no traction. The key is for somebody like him, it's got to get picked up by Elon Musk or Fox or Newsmax or for it to continue to have legs and to go. And it didn't. None of them were interested because he's got nothing. The only thing he got out of this was that's a national chain of gyms. He got banned for life by that chain, never allowed back in one of their gyms again. So that's what he got out of it.
Let's talk about Fawny Willis and this case, this kind of ongoing case where you're not really sure whether it's Fawny Willis who is on the stand or Donald Trump on the stand. I mean, the way they've reversed that, as we said last week, is pretty sad. I'm going to play this clip. You can explain what's happening here. Very interesting.
That she was serving as a district attorney. More importantly, it's been the allegations about race and religion being imputed in her speech, and that those comments were directed at the defendants at this table. And if you listen to the speech, those comments are directed at two elected or political officials. I believe it was Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ms. Bridget Thorne, who is a member of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners here. She specifically used their names. I don't know that they, and my knowledge is they're not supposed to be sitting at the table, and I haven't seen them in my work as it relates to this case, Your Honor.
It's more MAGA logic, isn't it? There's a guy pretending to be a lawyer there. So performative, all of this. Just explain what we were looking at.
Well, you know, I'm not wholly uncritical of Fawny Willis, you know, because I don't really understand exactly a lot of what she's doing in terms of, well, in terms of what she's doing is she's a politician, she's an elected official, and she wants to get reelected. But sometimes that's in conflict when you're prosecuting a high profile case. What I mean by that is she wants to defend herself with all these allegations that are being made against her with her constituents. The problem is her constituents are the jury pool for this case. And she's a prosecutor, not a state representative. So she's bound by very strict ethical rules. A good guidepost by this is look at Jack Smith. Has Jack Smith written a book like Fani Willis has come out with a book? Has he went and spoken at churches about this situation? You know, has he done TV interviews, press conferences? No, because as a prosecutor, you're not really supposed to be doing all of those things while a case is still pending. But she's doing it, and I understand why, because the allegations are personal to her. You know, they're attacking her personally. So she's in this tough position where she wants to defend herself to the public against some very ugly allegations, but at the same time, she's got to be very careful not to cross any lines here. And so I think that the judge is going to rule in her favor. I would guess this is a tricky situation. I think he's not going to want to say that she lied. I think he's gonna rule in her favor, but he's gonna not sort of judge whether he believes her or not. He's gonna say that even if all the stuff that they're saying about her relationship with Wade is true, I still don't have the legal authority to disqualify her. I think that that's what he's going to say.
But before the relationship with Wade was exposed, she didn't do unnecessary press conferences or any stuff. She was pretty tight-lipped about this case, wasn't she?
Mostly.
Mostly.
Yeah.
It's only now because they've made this personal.
Yeah.
And you could argue, and obviously I'm defending her because, you know, people need to understand that professional people can keep their professional and personal lives separate. People who are educated and have a trade, in this case, you know, the law, as a prosecutor, you can mentally keep these things separate, which is why that whole thing that blew up with Donald Trump, you know, talking about Lisa Page and the lovers and all that stuff. It's like there is a difference between your professional work, whether you're in the FBI or whether you are here in Georgia. And I trust the fact that people can do that. But again, this projection of these kind of MAGA lawyers basically saying that you are compromised. You know, we are allowed to love who we love. We're allowed to have relationships with whoever we have relationships with and still be able to do our jobs. Everybody does it every day. So this is just, you know, it's MAGA propaganda. No wonder she's desperate to defend herself, because she's been stung in the same way that Engoron is trying to be stung in the gym. I mean, that's what this is. This is a hit job.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they do. They personally go after you. I think that the best argument that was made by her team there in court was when they said, you know, it's their position that that she indicted Donald Trump to create a lucrative job for her boyfriend. That's their theory, right? We talked about that last week.
Yeah.
The best argument against that they made, which I found very persuasive, was the fact that Nathan Wade was her third choice. She asked the former governor of Georgia, Roy Barnes, who's a famous lawyer in Georgia, she asked him first to have that job. He turned her down. And he turned her down because he said, I don't want to live the rest of my life with bodyguards. And that's what I'm going to have to do if I agree to take this job, right? He wanted no part of it. Then she asked another prominent Georgia attorney, who was a white guy, if he would take the job. He turned her down. Only then did she hire Wade. So the idea that like Donald Trump was only indicted so she could hire her boyfriend was proven wrong. And that's why they had Roy Barnes testify about that at this hearing. So yeah, I think that what the judge is going to do is he's just going to rule that, look, maybe some of these things are questionable. Maybe some of these things are shady as far as the compensation and all that goes. And maybe certain things weren't reported like they're supposed to. But those are all matters for the voters when she runs for re-election, and the Georgia bar. They're not disqualifying. I think that that's what he's going to say.
From my perspective as a Brit and a European, the fact that a DA is elected is so weird. And you guys think it's normal, and it is complete nonsense. There you go. Finish that.
I think it's a little bit dicey. It presents problems.
Talking of Europe, European leaders are kind of scrambling to try and protect themselves, NATO trying to protect itself in the event that Donald Trump wins the election and then takes the US out of NATO, and then all of these countries won't have the support and protection of the US military. I mean, this is very, very serious. And Emmanuel Macron of France is now saying, you know, should we give over our future to the American electorate? Here's a clip of him making a speech with subtitles.
Si l'Europe, et je dirais a fortiori chacun de nos États membres, dont la France, nous sommes souverains, notre avenir, et si on considère que cette guerre détermine notre avenir, ce que je crois profondément, parce que se joue là notre sécurité comme Européens, est-ce que nous devons déléguer notre avenir à l'électeur américain? Ma réponse est non, quel que soit son vote. Donc on n'a pas à attendre le résultat. C'était le but de cette réunion d'aujourd'hui, c'est pour ça que je l'ai voulu maintenant. N'attendons pas de savoir quelle est l'issue de ce résultat. Décidons maintenant, parce que le constat est clair. C'est notre avenir, c'est l'Europe qui est en jeu. C'est aux Européens de décider. C'est formidable si on en a d'autres qui nous joignent, mais ça doit être en plus. Nous devons avoir la possibilité de faire sans. Pas par défiance, pas par pessimisme, pas parce qu'on aurait peur, juste parce que c'est ce qui dépend de nous. C'est ce qu'on doit faire. Je suis dans cet état d'esprit.
I mean, this is deadly serious, Ron. I mean, so much so that on Monday they announced that Albania is opening a former Soviet airbase to, you know, allow NATO aircraft to be there just by nature of its geographical location, again for protection against the Russians. I mean, this is really serious, and it's all because of one orange man and his desire to kind of be best.
Because you can go back ever since the creation of NATO in 1949, and you can go back through every decade. And even though we've had great differences at home over civil rights, over Watergate, over, you know, whatever, Afghanistan, Iraq, whatever the case may be, we've had great domestic and foreign policy differences between the two political parties in the United States. This is one thing that's always been bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans have always agreed that we should be part of the NATO alliance and should be all in, and that was never seriously questioned. I mean, only maybe a very small handful of people on the polar extremes, like 1% of each party, either, you know, liberals for the peace, as you know, they were pacifists, or right wingers who are isolationists, but everyone else was 90% of the country was for NATO. So Europe never really had to worry about our presidential elections. But now we have a Republican candidate, party leader, who is hostile to NATO, who expresses the same views and same talking points towards NATO as Vladimir Putin. And that has, and in 2016, it was pretty much just him saying it, not the Republican Party. So there really wasn't a huge danger. But now the Republican Party, because of the MAGA movement, has so transformed itself that a huge percentage of this party agrees with him about NATO. And you hear them questioning whether we even should be in NATO. Elon Musk tweeted on Friday night saying, why do we even still have NATO anymore? Why do we even need to belong to NATO anymore? JD Vance, all the Russian apologists are tweeting the same thing. So there's actually a serious debate among serious, well-connected, wealthy, powerful people in this country now over whether we should even remain in NATO. And that was not the case before Donald Trump came on the scene.
And it didn't help that Donald Trump said that he would actively encourage Russia to attack NATO countries that hadn't paid their fair share. You could take off that last part of the sentence because it was nothing to do. I mean, most of them pay their 2% of GDP. And if it's not 2%, it's really close. Trump doesn't understand NATO. He doesn't understand that the US has a larger economy, therefore it pays a larger percentage. He can't qualify any of this. He sees it all as a business transaction. And so, if he's got Putin in his ear, Putin, of course, has always wanted NATO to cease to exist. It's just so blatant that he is a Russian asset, along with all of these surrogates in the Republican Party now who are just doing Putin's bidding. It's very worrying, and the European leaders are not stupid, and so they are taking steps to protect themselves, including buying an awful lot of military equipment and arms and everything else, which is going to... It's the start of something that we really shouldn't be living through in our lifetime. NATO was created in, 1948, after the Second World War, to prevent World War III.
And at the time, there was only a handful of countries. I think it was a dozen.
Yeah.
And they were all in Western Europe and the United States. So, and it's expanded. And the reason why it's expanded into Eastern Europe is clear, because the NATO alliance is successful and it works. And everyone who has become a part of the NATO alliance has ceased to be invaded from that day forward ever. So you're safe when you're part of NATO, because it's about collective security. It's not just a bulwark against the Soviet Union or Russia. Yes, that's been the primary purpose of it, but it's not the sole purpose.
No.
There's other reasons for NATO as well. And so the idea that because the Soviet Union, doesn't exist anymore, we don't need NATO anymore, just completely misunderstands what the alliance is all about.
And it's never about money, and it shouldn't be about money. And Trump makes it all about money, but that's really just a cover because he's doing what Putin asked him, possibly during that secret meeting in Helsinki. We'll never know. Okay, final point here on this kind of special extended show is Rick Scott, who sounds like he's now assembled a group of senators who might back him to succeed Mitch McConnell. As we discussed on the show last week, Mitch McConnell has announced his retirement in November as leader of the GOP in the Senate, although for some reason he's going to stay on in the Senate. Let's have a little listen to Rick.
And with the support of a lot of wonderful other people, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, Ron Johnson, JD Vance is up there, Josh Hawley, we're fighting every day. So the first step is absolutely let's all get together and say we're going to solve the problems of this country.
No, you're not. What a terrible list of curios there. I mean, that's the best they've got.
He just listed all the worst people in the Senate, other than maybe I'd add Marsha Blackburn in there.
Yeah. Well, he mentioned all the extremists.
The worst one. He tried to topple Mitch McConnell in 2022 with many of those same people backing him then. And he failed. I think he got 10 votes or something like that. It wasn't even close. And he did it with Trump's backing, by the way. Trump likes Rick Scott. I don't think Rick Scott especially likes Trump, but Trump likes Rick Scott, and Rick Scott plays the game. And he's from Florida, and he doesn't want to pick any fights with Donald Trump. So he's going to obviously, now he's back because it's wide open. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of people here. John Cornyn from Texas has already talked about running. I don't think he really has any support. I think what's going to happen is the old guard, the Mitch people, are going to coalesce around one person. I predicted that's going to be John Thune, senator from South Dakota. And I think that the MAGA people are going to coalesce around Rick Scott. And you're going to have a real battle because, look, if I had to bet now, I'd probably give you a 70% chance that the Republicans are going to control the Senate just because of a numbers game, because of how many Democrats are up in tough places all over the place. Ohio, Montana, one state after another, Pennsylvania, Democrats are in tough battles. And there really aren't many Republicans that are in the same position. So we only got a 1-seat majority. So if I had to bet, whoever this person is going to be the Senate majority leader. So it's going to be incredibly important who it is. If it's Rick Scott, we're going to have a mess. If it's somebody like John Thune, who's a deal maker, he's like Mitch. He's very conservative. He's not our friend, but he's going to be a hell of a lot better than Rick Scott.
Okay. Let's. Well, we can only wait to see how that's going to play out. I hate to tempt fate, which is why I'm saying nothing. We have to finish, but thank you, Ron Filipkowski. Always a pleasure to hang out with you. I'm Anthony Davis. If you want to download the audio podcast of Uncovered, you can do that tonight. It'll be available for you wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to watch this again and share it, then just rewind as soon as we've finished. And details about our sponsor can be found down in the description. Have yourselves a great week. Thanks again, Ron.
I am off to the White House. I'm going to D.C. for the State of the Union.